we have been on. We started using Maimonides in his Sefer Hamada, the book of science, which really is more his book of philosophy than anything else. We're going to the 5th chapter of repentance, and for this one, the idea is we're dealing with the issue of free will. This appears in the laws of repentance because Maimonides needs to set down you are excused, and you get full marks for your for the first class, Sue. So this so Maimonides is going to lay down the fundamentals of this, because if we cannot establish that you are a person who has free choice, if God is making you do everything, if the reason that you stop at McDonald's and eat a bacon double cheeseburger, or let me be even more interesting here. If you are, I forget what his name is, Luigi. I forget what his name is. The shooter.
Oh, the guy, yeah, Luigi something.
Yeah, Luigi. If you were Luigi who just shot the CEO of U.S. Healthcare, if he's hearing voices that says, that tells him to do things, he's thoroughly, he's experiencing pure psychosis, which is telling him, you must kill this person, and God is sending him those voices, then how can God hold him responsible? These voices, as far as I understand psychosis, they're compelling, and you can't say no to them. It's the mind is taken over. If that's the case, which does not seem that is the case, because typically if God was telling you and you were convinced that God was telling you, you wouldn't use a silencer, you wouldn't use a fake ID in advance, you wouldn't run away, you wouldn't wear a hoodie and a mask for extended periods of time. Anyway, but it's a good example for how for this sense of spiritual accountability, is because if you cannot be held accountable for it, then if you have no free will, then God can't hold you accountable. If you do have free will, God can hold you accountable. And here we then come to another theological stumbling block. The theological stumbling block is, how can God be all-knowing if God is not pulling the strings? If you are a volitional individual, if you are a person with free choice, then you either have the choice to pull the trigger or not to pull the trigger. You have the choice either to eat the cheeseburger or not to eat the cheeseburger. You have the choice to keep the Shabbat or violate the Shabbat. You can pick any one of the 613 mitzvot. These are, of course, your choices. So here, Rambam is going to say, Reshut l'chol adam netuna. Permission, free will, is given to every person. If you want to go to the good path, good. Liot tzaddik harashut biado. To be righteous, it is all in your power. Liot rasha. If you want to go to the evil path and to be wicked, harashut biado, he has permission to do that. How do we know this is true? It says, Hein ha'adam haya ke'echad mimenu ladat tov rara. In the story of the tree of knowledge, it says, man has become one of us, knowing good and evil, meaning he has total choice. Kolomar, hein min zeh shel adam haya yachid ba'olamo ve'ein min sheni domelo. All the other creatures of the world are stimulus response, stimulus response, stimulus response. There is no such thing as free will for a Labrador retriever. There is no such thing as free will for a bat. There's no such thing as free will for a whale, right? Only humans have the ability to make choice, good versus evil. Do whatever you like. There's no one who's going to prevent them to do the good or bad. And this is the statement, lest he stretch out his hand, because man has the choice of whether to do that or not.
However, the dichotomy between everything is predicted except the choice is given. הכל צפוי והרשות
All
נתונה.
right, Annie, hold on. Give the Rambam a minute or two to write down his words. Right? Al yavor b'machshavtecha, or should I say b'machshavteich?
I know he solves the dichotomy.
Davar says she'omrim tipshei umot haolam v'rov gomlei b'nei Yisrael. Don't let it get into your mind that which the silly ones say. Shakadosh Baruch Hu gozer al adam mitchila briato, that Hashem determines for each person from his birth. Astrology. Rambam does not believe in astrology, or at least not as the astrology pages would have it, or at least not as ancient astrologers would have it. Right? You are not assigned at birth to be at tzaddik or rasha. Ein adavar kain, ela kol adam ro'i lo liot tzaddik. Moshe Rabbeinu, every one of us could be a Moshe, or Rasha Kiravam, or you could be a wicked person like Yeravam ben Nevat who split the Jewish people in half. O Chacham, O Sachal, O Rahman. You could be a wise person, an understanding person, a merciful person, O Achzari, or you could be someone who's very cruel, etc., etc. Klomar, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu gozer al ha'adam liot tov v'lo liot ra. God does not determine that you should be good or bad, right? It is the sinner then who causes his own destruction. Therefore, a person should repent his ways. Rambam is going to go on to say, as Annie pointed out, the idea is that God may understand you well enough to be able to understand what decision you might make. But that does not mean that you are forced to make such a decision. Okay. So we now covered free will of a sort. I know that we could spend a lot more time discussing free will, but I want to
Can we say in short that sentence, all is predicted except we have free choice, is really to indicate that Hashem may know in advance what we're going to choose. Not that he determines what we're going to choose, but he knows in advance what we're going to choose.
Or it sounds like God doesn't have free choice.
No, but he just knows what
He
we're going to
doesn't
choose.
if he can't intervene.
But he doesn't have to intervene because he were given free choice. The fact that he may know in advance what we're going to choose does not take away our free choice. Does that make sense?
Correct. I look, I think the way I would you might understand this a little bit differently is that it in terms of probabilities, that knowing all of the inputs, God knows us well enough. In other words, I would say my wife might know that if we're having a conversation and I get a call from the president of the shul, then I'm going to interrupt my wife to take that call from the president of the shul. Now, does that mean that my wife makes me take that? Makes you take that call? No. It means that she knows me well enough to know what I'm going to do in that situation. Because unfortunately, I'm a predictable creature, right? So I think this is part of the difference between understanding something and causing it.
Yes.
There is still room for there to be a lot of conflict on that subject. I just don't have I can't cover that right now. And it also, I would say, it is a very scientifically controversial subject. I would say that the scientific community, unfortunately, is leaning farther and farther to the concept that people do not have free will. They have a funny term for it. think they call it the homunculus, which is the region of the brain that they have not found, which will which would cause free will. So the scientific community, it's certainly not a settled matter in the scientific community. And one of the things which is very difficult for science to figure out is, where is the seat of self in the mind? What is the part of your mind that determines the you, the innermost you, the volitional you, the you that's making these decisions? We are very well aware of the fact that I can train myself to make certain decisions, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy is a version of psychology which allows you to make better choices. Just as an example of how this works, right? They tell you never shop hungry, right? You never go to the grocery store hungry, because that's when you come home with Haagen-Dazs, right? But if you had a bowl of vegetable soup before you went to the market and you were full, then you would buy, carrots and apples and things like that. Now, and now it's the same thing is, by the way, true is that, let's say you have a lot of test anxiety, right? Which is something people normally have. Well, a good therapist is going to tell you, okay, when you go in that test, you go into that test, and what does your anxiety say to you? Your anxiety says to you, I'm going to fail this test. And then the therapist is going to say, have you ever failed a test? If you actually studied, did you ever fail a test? And the person's going to say, no, I've never actually failed a test. What's the lowest grade you've ever gotten on a test? Well, once I got a B minus. And so, okay, that was the worst. Why was that? Well, that was, after the flu, and I didn't really study well enough, and I got a B minus. So when you've actually studied, when you take the sample study of all the times you've actually studied, have you ever failed a test? No. What's the lowest grade you ever got on a test? I got a B plus on that test. What was that subject? That subject was, macroeconomics with really hard problems. So I got a B plus. It was hard, but I didn't fail. So when you go into a test and you pretend you're going to fail, not only are you choosing an unlikely outcome, you're making the unlikely outcome the most common outcome. And so you can say to yourself, okay, I know what my mind is doing right now. My mind is trying to take me into a place where I think the worst outcome is the most likely outcome. I know that's not the case. I'm going to sit myself down. I'm going to remember all the tests that I got good grades on. I'm going to remember that I really studied. I'm going to remember that I took a practice test and I did fine on the practice test. I'm going to remember that I went to the office hours and the professor told me that I was ready. Whatever it is, right? You've done these things. You remind yourself. Now you have gone from the automatic brain to one which has changed the way in which you respond to a particular situation. Now that's one which we can all recognize, because more or less we've all gone through high school or some portion thereof, and we have an experience with those exact kinds of situations. Now, when it comes to a spiritual scenario, right? Let's say one of the things that you do is you really get mad at somebody in these kinds of situations, or you really condescend to someone, and this is an act that you consider a sin. Maybe it is a sin, and you want to stop it. So then you have to say, okay, when I get in the room with Sally, right? Why is it that when she opens up her mouth, I just, tear into her like it's like I have permission to, like she's my slave and I get to verbally lash her? Well, let's get back to, let's use a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. I should treat Sally like she's my boss. I should treat Sally like she's my grandmother. How would you talk to your grandmother if she made that comment? Well, not like you talk to Sally. So you pretend Sally's your grandmother. And then you can use that kind of thing to make a very informed decision about how you behave with Sally and to get out of that. Is that easy? No. Is it possible? Yes. It's all a question of how much you put into it. So I think that some of those questions where it's sometimes hard to figure out exactly where there is certainly a part of the human brain which is stimulus response. There's certainly a part of this which the halacha recognizes as very impulsive. But there is a part of the brain that I think everybody recognizes that can plan and can change the impulse response. Jewish thought believes that that is a very important part of the free will. And the scientific community is having trouble figuring out where the I is in this. And I do believe there are some scientists who still believe in free will. I just want to tell you, if you don't believe in free will, it is a very dark world, right? Because if you don't believe in free will, what's the point of trying? Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Maybe another day. Yeah, so but the quantum physicists are not the ones who really work on this problem. It's the neurobiologists who work on this problem. But we're really far afield. Yeah.
We can't hear Esther.
I'm going to repeat the question when it gets articulated.
Okay.
The idea that humans experience or interpret time as linear, those constraints wouldn't be on Hashem, and therefore there's no issue with like him knowing everything that happens.
Now I feel supremely incapable of dealing with time theory and how God works into time theory and how time theory then knowledge of future dimensions of time work in with the with all of this picture. It's a very good question, very on point. If I was able to do I have to confess I have not done a full and deep read on a lot of especially modern Jewish thought on some of these questions. So I will have to park some of these and deal with them later, trying to survey some broad pieces of this picture and our next stop on this rather fast-moving train. And I apologize for that because that is a good question that deserves a good answer, as does Annie's question about free will. And so just once again, to summarize the question and the lack of answer, the question is, well, if God occupies all times as one, which is certainly a very strong idea within the Kabbalah, then we can't talk about that in human terms. Doesn't necessarily erase free will, but it creates a whole other strain on the question, which I am not prepared to answer, regrettably. So we'll have to punt that to a future opportunity. But it gives me, I love these questions because they give me opportunities to do good research. But we are moving on to the next section, and the next section is idol worship. Now, idol worship, I'm just going to spend just a second on this. It's in the curriculum from Chicago, so I thought it would be good to keep it in here. This is, Maimonides gives an anthropology of idol worship. Maimonides' anthropology of idol worship, I'll just actually put this up in English for you, because I'm assuming that's the language that most people are going to see. So he says, during the times of Enosh, mankind made a great mistake, and the wise men of that generation gave thoughtless counsel. Enosh himself was one of those who erred. Enosh is Adam's grandson. And their mistake was as follows. They said, God created the stars and the spheres, planets, I guess, with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants who minister before him. Accordingly, his physicists praise and glorify the planets and the stars, right? And then basically the theory is going to go that they was a transposition. Instead of the sun being something that God created, that we say, wow, what's amazing is the sun, that which God created, the sun became God. And that's how you got to Amun-Ra. That's how you got the Egyptian sun god. And I'm sure the Apollo is the Greek one. And if I knew more about the Babylonians, I'm sure they have a sun god too. And Abraham was the one who was able to reverse this trend. And this basically brings us to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So Abraham becomes the first to recognize God according to Maimonides' version, as a monotheist. I think there are other versions of this that can be told with some nuance. One is that it is ethical monotheism. Another one of it is that the gods are invented as a tool of political manipulation. I can point to various different thinkers who all have that idea. You can see how they're very similar to each other, but the idea is that the world sort of strayed into idol worship. One thing which is important to understand in Judaism is that idol worship is considered one of the great cardinal sins. It is one of the few sins that if you are asked to commit an act of idol worship or take a bullet, you are meant to take a bullet. If I said to you, I'm escaping from a bank robbery, you drive the car on Shabbat, I'm putting a gun to your head, drive the car as fast as you can. What do? Drive. Break every law of speeding, except maybe those which could endanger other drivers or pedestrians. You do not have the right to endanger other people to save your own life, but assuming you are just driving on empty road, then you're safe to go. You can violate the Shabbat, but if that same bank robber turns around to you and says, okay, pray with me, Hail Mary, whatever, right? Then you say, sorry, that's where my allegiance to your gun ends. And so idol worship is considered a very, very serious sin. Perhaps the reason it is such a serious sin is because idol worship undermines the very foundation of what Torah is about. Torah is about that we believe that God created the world. God created the world with a purpose. That purpose is manifest in the mitzvot that we all perform. And so I think it's very important to understand that there are entire tractates of the Talmud which are devoted to dealing with idol worship. Just to give you an interesting example, right? Now, idol worship is when you say man is God. I'm going to quickly get us into hot water. I'm going to show you how we get out of hot water, but I'm going to get us into hot water. Here's hot water, right? In the Catholic faith, as I understand it, you are obligated to believe that God became man in the person of Jesus Christ. If you were asked the question, was Jesus all God? You have to say no. Was Jesus all man? You have to say all no. If you were asked, what is Jesus? You can say it's a unique situation where he was both flesh and God all at the same time, right? I'm not an expert in Catholicism, but I believe that that's how it goes. In Judaism, that is a bit of a problem, right? Because we say in our elements of faith, ein lo guf, ein lo demuta guf, God has no body, he has no shape of a body, right? Nothing like that at all. So now we have a real big problem, because that means that your neighbor, Father McGillicuddy, is a card-carrying idol worshiper. And if he's a card-carrying idol worshiper, and he says to you, would you mind if I borrow $1,000 from you? Christmas is coming, and I just need a little extra cash until after the holidays. The answer is you're not allowed to lend him money for the holidays, because if it's idol worship, he might spend it on idol worshipy kinds of things. I'll make it even worse for you. Let's say you are the owner of the local kosher grocery, and you make the best brisket in the entire city. And the Father McGillicuddy comes in and says, I'm having Christmas dinner, and I want to serve your brisket, Chaim Yankel. You cannot sell him that brisket, because you cannot sell him something he's going to eat at his feast of idol worship. Okay. I hope I've gotten you into some sufficiently good trouble. We are being very un-Canadian right now. This is about as un-Canadian as the Canadians get. I can already feel the discomfort in the room. I'm not sure online. I can't see as much discomfort.
Yeah, on Zoom too.
On Zoom too. Good. Okay, so how did our forefathers, Rashi, Tosfos, they lived in lands that were far more Catholic than this, right? How did they deal with this problem? So they said, the Trinity has a name. The Trinity's name is called Shituf. Shituf means partnership. So the Trinity is not quite it's not being a pagan. It's not believing in multiple gods. It doesn't mean you believe in a pantheon. It's a very unique thing. And in the Noahide code, that is not going to be considered idol worship. It's close enough. It's good enough they sort of believe in one God. They believe in one God with this weird wrinkle that they say is unique, that can't be really any kind of analogy. It's a self-internal contradiction. Can't be. It's not such a problem on the Noahide code. Can a Jew believe it? No, a Jew cannot believe it. When you get to the code of Sinai, Sinai does not tolerate that level of idol worship. So that means you cannot have a Christmas tree in your house. You cannot sing Christmas carols. You cannot sing Silent Night. Yes, I know it's beautiful music, but you can't, right? You cannot sing Amazing Grace. I know it's even more beautiful music. You cannot sing it, right? Those are not, those for a Jew, that's a problem. If your neighbor wants to sing Amazing Grace, right? Do you need to uproot his idol worship? No, it's not idol worship for him. That's how this problem was solved in those terms. But the reason I sort of went through this exercise is you need to appreciate how significantly challenging idol worship is for Judaism. Where this is going to put you into serious trouble is your next visit to France or Italy. I'll pick on France for the moment. They just reopened the Notre Dame Cathedral, right? After it was 5 years, €1 billion, right? We all saw it this past week before Syria was liberated. Notre Dame was the headline, right? Can you go to Paris and go visit Notre Dame? Answer is no. Go to Synagogue de la Victoire. Do not go to a Jew cannot go into the Notre Dame Cathedral. A Jew, on your next trip to Italy, you are not allowed to go into the Sistine Chapel. You are not allowed to go into the Medici Chapel in Florence. You cannot go see the Duomo in also Florence. You cannot go, but you can go to the Great Synagogue of Florence, which looks like the Duomo. You can go into Tempio Maggiore in Rome, right? So that is part of the Grace is saying, Lucky, I've done that already. Okay, that's some people's good ate lobster before I was from, right?
Consider idol worshiping to go see the architecture?
You are not supposed to derive benefit from idol worship. Okay, but rarely are Jews going into Notre Dame because there's nowhere else. Yeah, that would count. I mean, look, that's not okay. I don't know if you have to die for that. I'm not saying you have to die for that. Like there's a hailstorm, you could die outside and go into Notre Dame. I think God would probably forgive you. This is not an official answer for anybody's conversion exam or anything like that, but it is definitely a lower level if you go into a church for refuge. I will tell you that our ancestors, in the Crusades, took refuge in the bishop's quarters. We're far afield, but I'll just give you this. Not everyone sees Christianity as all that bad. There is a position of Rabbeinu Menachem HaMeiri, who is a very important Provençal rabbi whose writings were lost for a long time, who writes of Christianity. He says, it's not idol worship at all, because Christianity is a very fascinating term. He uses, they are umot hagdurot bedarke hadatot. They are people who are self-restrained in the manner of religion. So this is a very interesting term, because he's saying, what's paganism? Paganism is the cult of male prostitution that the Canaanites used. Paganism is the cult of Molech, throwing your children into the fire so you have a good crop. That's paganism. Paganism doesn't ask you to engage in self-disciplined behavior, but Christianity has lots of self-disciplining behaviors. You know that guy Jesus? He lifted most of his stuff he lifted from the book of Devarim. He got that from Moses. A lot of his stuff, when he says uncircumcise your heart, that's not his, when he says circumcise your heart, that's not his line. That's Moshe's line that he's lifting, right? most of the things that he says are reworking of things that you can find in earlier Torah texts. And so he of course is working on a system of religion. Maimonides, we might actually see this Maimonides in just a little bit. Maimonides says that both Islam and Christianity are proto-messianic events because both of them bring the world from paganism to believe in one God. So there's room perhaps to see Christianity a little bit differently. I'm not, I think it's a topic in flux. And so, I will tell you also that one of the rabbis that I respected most in the world, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, went into Westminster Abbey, which, as far as I know, is still a church. He went there for a a wedding. I think William and Kate, he was there. That's a whole other discussion about how you do that and when is that possible. But that means that going into the church in and of itself is not the worst issue. It is not like actually, taking mass, but still it's something that Jews do not do. And this aversion to idol worship, the sense that it is corrosive to the command of God and the understanding of God, which is necessary to adopt the Torah, is sort of, I think, an important point.
What about during the Inquisition as a way of pikuach nefesh?
Okay. And he's getting me to the Inquisition. So I'm going to do 10 seconds on the Inquisition, and then we're going to leave it, because the problem with the Inquisition is that those people already made the decision to become Christian. The Inquisition had no power over the Jews. The Inquisition was for Christians who took Christianity to save their skin, and then they had to act like Christians. But they were already, there's a massive debate, both in their day and in their historians, about whether or not these people should be considered good or bad and then you have a second problem, the second generation who didn't make that choice, they were just raised that way. So look, Annie, those are complicated scenarios. Thank God those are not our tests. Okay, I'm just going back to my notes.
You touched on it in the past when you discussed the Inquisition time.
I'm not saying that I did not touch on it in the past. That was in our class about Jewish history class, when we talked about the Inquisition and those things. It's just the focus today is a little bit different, so I want to stay reasonably on topic. Kings and Wars. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to 11 actually.
Oh no, hide.
No, I want to go to 11 and 12. Okay. All right. This is about Mashiach. Now, Mashiach is a difficult topic. Why is Mashiach a difficult topic? Because nobody really agrees what Mashiach is going to do. Rambam is the great champion and flag bearer of the rational Mashiach. Not that Mashiach will, according to anyone, is Mashiach irrational, but it is the rational Mashiach means that Mashiach manifests within a rationally conceived history. You'll see what I mean. In the future, the Messianic king will arise and renew the Davidic dynasty, restoring it to its original sovereignty. He will build the temple and gather the dispersed of Israel. Then, in his days, the observance of all statutes will return to their previous state. We will offer sacrifices, observe the sabbatical and jubilee years according to all their particulars as described by the Torah. Anyone who does not believe in him or does not await his coming denies not only the statements of the other prophets, but those of the Torah and Moses, our teacher. The Torah testified to his coming. As it says in Deuteronomy, God will bring you back your captivity and mercy upon you. He will again gather you from among the nations, even in your diaspora. It is at the ends of the heaven. God will gather you up from there and bring you to the land. right? So if you had asked me, will Jews living in big houses with fat American salaries from Long Island move to the land of Israel, I might have said, well, I can't see it, but I don't know why not. If you said that to me in 1937, I would have said, well, that sounds like a fat chance. I don't see it happening, but you wouldn't say like it's like, you know, it's not like a wolf starting to eat grass. It's a different kind of a miracle, right? Well, I can tell you right now that in amongst the American Orthodox community, Long Island amongst them, Teaneck, New Jersey amongst them, there are a lot of people who leave. I know somebody who worked for Wachtell Lipton. Wachtell Lipton. Wachtell Lipton is maybe the most prestigious law firm in New York. It is a very, very, it's one of those he told me that when he worked there, he once got a pay raise. Why did they get a pay raise? Because they found out that there was a law firm in Chicago that was paying their associates more than Wachtell Lipton, so they raised the pay of all the associates at Wachtell Lipton. That's the kind of place it was. And guess what? You know where he lives now? He lives in Modi'in. And he and his family decided they wanted to leave. They lived, where did they live? Did they live in Teaneck? I think they lived in Teaneck, New Jersey. And they decided they were going to leave Teaneck, New Jersey, the comforts of America, to go live in Modi'in, right? When they lived in Teaneck, New Jersey, they didn't have to send their children to the army. Now that they live in Modi'in, their children enter the army. So this is something which represents a massive change. Now, who is the person who you're going to call the Mashiach in this situation? Is it Theodor Herzl? Is it David Ben-Gurion? Is it Chaim Weizmann? Is it Menachem Begin? Have your pick, right? Is it any one of them? Maybe could have fit, maybe not entirely Maimonides' description, but at least you get a sense of what that means. That for Maimonides, and even today, it's a little difficult to believe that there's somebody who's going to convince all Jews to return to the sacrificial order. Right now, it's a little hard to believe that we will rebuild the temple, which incidentally means dismantling the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is even harder to believe.
Is this an injunction that the Mashiach will bring the new temple? No, not so much the temple, like the sacrifices. I thought that sacrifices were finito, and we have the prayers instead.
So the argument is that the prayers are what we use now because we no longer have sacrifices.
Right.
And I am not, so that there is some scholarship about are we compelled to return to the sacrificial order? It would seem from here that Maimonides is assuming that is going to be the case.
Yeah.
That's how that's going to be returned. Now, so Maimonides, I want to say what Maimonides is not saying. Maimonides is following a position in the Talmud articulated by the 3rd century Amora named Shmuel. Shmuel says, Ein bein olam hazeh liyemot haMashiach ela shibud malchut bilvad. There's no difference between the days that we are living in and the days of the Messiah, except for the oppression of the non-Jews, which means that basically he has a position that says that Messiah will operate in normal historical time, and the Messiah will take us out of the diaspora, return us to the land of Israel, return us to keeping the sabbatical years, which, by the way, is very much in place, not entirely, but mostly, or I don't know, mostly, but it is significantly in place, right? And the one thing which is not currently happening is we are not in a position to upend the Muslim world and the Jewish world and rebuild the temple. and there's not a red heifer. So, does that mean that if it's, I would say, could be that God will fulfill everything in the messianic dimension, except we won't have a red heifer. If we don't have a red heifer, we can't become pure. If we can't become pure, we can't restore the sacrifices. And so if God makes it such that the conditions aren't there to restore sacrifices, so be it. They're not there, right? And so the Messiah will have fulfilled everything in theory, but he doesn't have to fulfill it in practice. I can't tell you what's going to be then, but I can tell you that I believe that God has the ability to appoint such a leader who in historical time, in normal, rational ways, can bring, life to, can restore the nation of Israel to its homeland in peace. Yes, I believe that. Is it happening in ways that I wouldn't expect? Yes. Right? Did I expect there to be an accord between Israel and the United Arab Emirates? No. Did I expect Syria to fall this week? No. Did I expect 3,000 Hezbollah fighters to lose their trigger fingers in pager accidents? No. Right? So there are a lot of things I didn't expect to happen. Beseder, that just means you need to have a lot of humility going to this. Now, Maimonides is going to give us all you can look up yourself. This is the chapter 11 of Kings and Wars. But in number 3, Maimonides is going to tell us one should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles and wonders and bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead, or perform other similar deeds, right? So don't look for magic Messiah, right? Maimonides tells us there's no such thing. The Messiah does not need to be magical. And he tells us that he brings us a very interesting piece of context here. Brought from the fact that Rabbi Akiva, one of the greater sages of the Mishnah, was one of the supporters of King Bar Koziva. The Talmud calls him Bar Koziva. His nickname was Bar Kochba because of the verse Darach Kochav B'Yakov. Right? Kochav is a star, B'Yakov in Jacob. So this was the star of in David. That's why he got the nickname Bar Kochba, but his original name, the way he's referred to in the Talmud, is Bar Koziva. And Shimon Bar Koziva, he was at the Rabbi Akiva thought he was the Messiah king. Now, Rabbi Akiva was into rude awakening. He and the sages considered him to be the Messianic king until he was killed because of his sins. Once he was killed, they realized he was not the Mashiach. And
he had military successes at the beginning.
He had 3 years of success. Right. The sages did not ask him for any signs or wonders. The main thrust of the matter is this: the Torah, its statutes, and its laws are everlasting. We do not add to them, we do not subtract to them. Now, the one thing Maimonides will also tell us about Messiah, Maimonides is very non-messianic focused. He says you have to believe in it, you have to believe in God's capability to do it, but that's not where you should spend your time. Maimonides believes that the Messiah does not bring you to love God or to fear God. That should not be the focus of your spiritual exploration. Now, clearly, not all of the rabbis believe this, but that's certainly the Rambam's position, and this may be part of why the Rambam is the patron rabbi of all rationalists.
Please. So if the idea of the Messianic era is a time when the gathering of the exiles is going to take place, does that mean that all the Jews have to come to Israel for this to happen, or is it sufficient that 10 million Jews are in Israel? So if that's the case, then we are in the Messianic era.
If I may quote to you from the prayer for the state of Israel, right? What do we call it? Reshit Smichat
Geulatenu.
What does that mean? Anna, you're the Hebrew expert. Tell everybody what Reshit Smichat Geulatenu means.
The beginning of the rise of our redemption.
Okay, so the standard translation is the first flowering of the promised redemption of your people.
Oh, yeah.
right? Is it the harvest? No. Is it the first flower? Yes.
That's a big deal, though, if it is.
I heard Rabbi Uri Sharkey say that the single greatest repentance movement in the history of the Jewish people was Shivat Zion, the return of the Jews to Israel.
But it happened before, and now it happened again.
Okay, even better, right? Um,
So do we need actually a Melech HaMashiach for this to happen, or it's happening without?
Maimonides does believe that there is a Melech HaMashiach, right? There is a Messiah King. But, since there's a lot which is left open. So, okay, I just was looking for one thing. Since
You
there's a
said
lot
it
which
was
is
answered. Ben-Gurion.
since there's a lot which is left open, Herzl, Rav Kook gave a famous eulogy called Hamisped B'Yerushalayim, a eulogy in Jerusalem, in which he talks about the concept of two Mashiachim. There are two Messiahs. There's the Mashiach ben Yosef and there's the Mashiach ben David. The Mashiach ben Yosef is the one who fights the battles of the Jews. And then there is a Mashiach ben David who fights the battles of the Ben David who accomplishes the spiritual return. And Rav Kook seems to suggest that Herzl, although he doesn't name him by name, but it's clear he's talking about, was Mashiach ben Yosef. So, I'm not here to I'm not the Messiah meter. That's not my job. But can I see, is there a sense that that Rav Kook had tremendous veneration for the secular Zionist movement? Now, I wanted to show you this because this is where Maimonides talks about Christianity and Islam as proto-messianic movements. The thoughts, the plannings, the calculations of the creator of the world, man cannot fathom them. Our way is not his way. And the way that we think is not the way that God thinks. Right? All of these things about Jesus of Nazareth, and of the Ishmaelite, that's Muhammad, who stood after him, they paved the way to Mashiach, right? Gotta love it, right? This, by the way, was censored out of Rambam for many years, but critical editions have found the original manuscripts, and these are Maimonides' original words, right? What is Jesus' job, right? Yeah, go walk into yeshiva with a T-shirt that says, right, Yeshu Hanotri, right, Eino ba ella letakin et olam. Jesus of Nazareth only came to fix the world, right? Quote Rambam, right? But it's true. This is how Rambam sees this process, and I don't think he's wrong. Letakin olam kulu lavod et Hashem biyachad, to worship God as one. Now, I ask myself, wait a minute, there's a bit of a thing because who believed in this idea of one God all powerful in the Ismailite tradition is a guy named Yihya Sinwar, right? And it's hard for me to see him as part of the Takin Olam. But these things are, again, I'm not, the Borei Olam, the creator of the world, these things in terms broader than I am capable of. And yes, it is horribly painful to see that outcome, but we may yet see this is better than paganism.
It's amazing. This sentence, if it's
Yes, right. There are billions of followers, and Yihya Sinwar was, yes, correct. Right. And between them, probably close to 3 billion monotheists. Right? So, and we are 16 million. We are a margin of error in the Muslim census. Okay, so that's Mashiach.
There was something about the language, the last sentence.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, please, it's on Safari, it's on the internet. This is in the 11th and 12th chapters of Rambam's laws of. I wanted to deal with heaven. Judaism, you will not find in the Torah, largely speaking, you will not find psukim that say you should keep the mitzvot so you get into heaven. It does says Laman Yirbu Yimechem Yimei B'nechem, so that we can extend your days and the days of your children. There is reward presented for some mitzvot, but the thrust of the Torah is not okay. We're getting into heaven. Yes, it is true that Pirkei Avot says that this world is only an antechamber to the next world, and Rambam will say that there is a good that is reserved for the righteous, tzafun tzadikim, 100%. But I want to take you to Isaiah chapter 64, verse 3. Isaiah 64, 3 will take me to, let me just go to texts. Tanakh, Isaiah. Okay, I promise I'll keep it English and Hebrew. Okay. Umeolam lo sham'u v'lo hazinu ayin lo ra'ata Elohim zulatecha ya'aseh l'mechakelo. Such things have never been heard or noted, no eye has seen them, O God, but you, who act for those who trust in you. This is the verse that tells us we don't get to see what's in heaven. That's not how Judaism rolls. Judaism is a system of mitzvot that is largely focused on doing what's right in this world. Yes, there's no question that Maimonides and other thinkers significantly talk about heaven, but it is not a major focus of the Tanakh, and I would say of general Jewish teaching. The way I would articulate I would say there are two ways where let me say this. The Torah largely articulates things in terms of obligations. Obligations are things that are derived because God said them, and the presumption is that if the infinitely wise and understanding God says that you should say Shema every morning, then you say Shema every morning. Maimonides also, by the way, is not a big fan of external reward. He is a believer in intrinsic reward. And in fact, even his structuring of heaven is about intrinsic reward, because Maimonides will essentially see heaven as the pinnacle of earthly soul development and knowledge of God. Now he sort of sees them on a single continuum. There's not this sort of sense that there is endless bounty. Maimonides famously will say, those people that think that there's going to be great food in heaven and wonderful drink in heaven and passionate love in heaven, nope, you will not have bodies, you will not have mouths, you will not be able to drink, it is not what it is. It is entirely about the soul. So, do not expect 70 virgins, that's not our version of it. Do not expect a feast or a banquet. That's not our version of it. Now, I will tell you that there are, Maimonides does not have again, no one's seen it. And doctrinally, we say we don't know what it is. And so there is rabbinic speculation on that subject. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that there are other ways of trying to understand spirituality that try to pierce the veil, if you will. We live in a very material, concrete, physical world, and there is a spiritual dimension that is actively discussed by many rabbis, but even they are more interested in you accessing the spiritual dimension in the here and now than pondering what's really going to happen in heaven. I would just say, in terms of my own experience as a rabbi who went to yeshiva, who listened to a lot of other rabbis, who listens to a lot of other rabbis, rabbis just don't spend a lot of time talking about the kingdom of heaven. They don't spend a lot of time about what happened. Yes, we do have prayers for that. We have a Yizkor, we have Kaddish. It's not that we don't believe in it. It is rather that is just not our driving focus. That is not what drives the car. The car is driven by a sense of obligation that God commanded you. And you want to live resonant with those values. And you want to access spirituality as you live. It is not that, you know what, I'm going to suffer in this world. I'm going to fast on Yom Kippur. I'm not going to eat pork or lobster. I am not going to gossip it because one day I'm going to have a great prize. That's just not what we work on. We're working on it's not that there isn't reward. It's not that we don't sometimes talk about that reward. It's not that we don't believe in it. It's just, and want to say that it is we don't spend a lot of time on that as a focus.